Weird thing is, Rick, I can't actually I can't see you or hear you very clearly.
Really?
Is your okay? Yeah. Can you?
I've got some background noise because it's raining.
Ah, right. Okay, that might be what it is.
Yeah. Let me just see if I can bring my mic up a little bit closer. Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you, but your picture is coming off
Blurred?
quite. Yeah. I'm just
okay. What I can see is it's clear. It's never as clear as yours. Do you use a cam?
yeah. I wish I didn't say because it's really showing all my lines and stuff.
No.
Never mind. Well, we're live anyway.
Right.
It's live. So, how are you? We're talking about moving beyond trauma today, and it seems a bit of a traumatic start to our show, which is very unusual, isn't it? How are you?
It is. Well, I'm at 10 o'clock this morning. Excuse me. I completed a liver cleanse, a liver flush.
Wow.
So it's a 6-day process, and the actual flush itself. I've actually flushed quite a few liver stones out today and last night. So I feel like I've gone through some psychic surgery, but at the same time, there's a cleanliness, there's a lightness that's associated with it, and having achieved it, I've done quite a few of these. Well, not quite a few, probably half a dozen of them in the past. And as we know, anger and aggression and irritability and all those things are stored in the liver. So it's always good to do a tune-up there, because the liver is one of the vital organs. So long way around answering your question, but I'm feeling good, but feel like I've undergone psychic surgery. How's that? We'll leave it at that.
Yes, I can only imagine what that feels like. I know that I recently was working at sort of like rehydrating myself at a really full level, and I've been using a lot of salt water, in baths and things like that, and detoxing. And I noticed just how sensitive I was. I got very emotional. I had lots of instincts coming up out of nowhere, and it reminded me of so many old issues that maybe were unhealed. So I can only imagine what that must be like when you're really clearing out the liver.
Yeah. Physically, it's painless. But yeah, I would say I feel a bit, was probably overly sensitive this morning. So that seems to be dissipating now. But don't swear at me or I'll cry.
Okay, I promise. I'll be nice. I'll play nicely.
You always are. So let me ask you the question. How are you doing today?
Well, I've been up since 3 o'clock, which might account for why I'm looking so like blurry, like why my eyes are looking so swollen and heavy. I'm getting ready to launch a course, and I've been trying to find the title of it, and nothing's made sense. And just in this last half an hour, I think I've kind of got it. But you know, when you're kind of working on your website or something that you're offering, and it doesn't quite feel right, and it's almost like you're branding yourself, even though you're not. You're doing. I don't know. It's like. I think it's like a process of self-discovery. You're almost taking yourself apart, and as you come to the core of what's going on, then all of a sudden it all comes into place. And for me, my realization literally just about an hour ago is that I am a survivalist, and I don't mean that necessarily in a conspiracy theory way, though I do. Carl does joke that if I look at Telegram that I'm going on Conspiracy Mums, which he thinks is a channel, so he just thinks I'm a conspiracy mum that might be doing stuff, which I always find quite amusing. But I realized that my life has been about treading the path between what we're told is real, and then what I've always sensed was real, and trying to make sense of that gap. And so I realized that what I'm working on at the moment is a course to help people feel comfortable with their feet in both camps. You know, I know lots of people who are awakened, and I know lots of people who find it easy to kind of exist in a sort of 5D realm. And I just can't do it. I can't do it full time. I can't even do it half the time. But I like to think I've got a lot of the sort of awakening mindsets coming into play, and I still have a lot of sort of root-based stuff going on as well. And I'm very happy to like leave it behind. And I know it's easing off all the time. I just consider myself to be a very normal person who's kind of traversing two roads, and how I might do it. That's my road to survival. I'm kind of working on that at the moment, trying to kind of, find a way to help other people who might be in a similar position. Because I think there's lots of us. There are some people who are very sort of like free of the confines of the earthly matters. And then there's lots of people who are really just in the earthly matters. And then there's these people who are kind of fitting in between. And so I want to help them as much as I can. And at the same time, obviously help myself, because, anytime we teach or share or, make content to help others, we're helping ourselves at the same time. So there you go. It's a bit of an ongoing realization and project.
Yeah. Very interesting. May I go ahead?
Go on. What were you going to say?
May I comment?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
You know me. Got
yeah.
an answer or comment for everything.
No,
First of all,
I don't it fully.
I don't see you as a conspiracy theorist, or although we've both been labelled it. I've renounced that title, and I prefer to call myself a truth seeker.
Yes, I like that.
CIA created that moniker of conspiracy theorist to debunk any narrative that there was more than one shooter of Kennedy. And anybody that came up with a different narrative was then framed as a conspiracy theorist. And of course, it's now anybody that is not in tune with the narrative, the mainstream media's narrative, is immediately labeled a conspiracy theorist. And yet what we've done in the background is sought the truth. We wanted to know. Something didn't resonate. We are intuitive. We have the capacity of critical thinking, and we have discernment, and we have a modicum of consciousness. And all of those will send us down the path. Well, what's behind that? That's, hang on, that doesn't make sense. Right? So we then pursue the truth. So that's one thing. I see you as a truth seeker. The other one is a survivalist. And there's no doubt that we have survived. We're going to be talking about trauma later on. We have survived trauma in our life. We've survived pain and disruption and discomfort. But in essence, survival is right down the bottom of the chart in terms of the levels of consciousness. Because survival is basically there's four basic commodities in life: food, shelter, clothing, and transport. Transport might be a water buffalo, or it might just be a track on which you can carry your produce from the village to the market or something. But those four basics, and those represent our survival. And if you're living in Portugal, doing what you're doing now, able to take the kids down the beach, launching a new course, food in your belly, all of those things, you've gone well beyond survival.
Yeah.
Well beyond it. So, yes, there are loads and loads of people, 2 billion people on this planet are basically, and probably more are, basically in survival mode. They are just trying to get some food and some shelter. So there's definitely a need to help those people that are underprivileged and struggling. At the same time, there's a lot of people that are awakening and becoming more conscious. So if we have survival at the bottom of the pyramid, don't like to use that word so much.
No.
Bottom of the pile on consciousness, but the very top one for humans is to be of selfless service to others.
Yes.
So somewhere in between we are there, right? And it doesn't make us better than anybody else. We are, in some estimates, we might fall down into survival. If there was an earthquake here, right,
it'll be at the survival.
I would, and it destroyed the place or heavily damaged it with all of the infrastructure that we're used to, it would knock us down temporarily into survival mode, right? But then you would rapidly come back, or hopefully. So there's just some thought. So did you arrive at the course name?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because what you're saying about survival is absolutely spot on. And I also was like, the word soul kept coming up, like the idea of the higher end of the, the so-called thing that you don't want to name, that I'm going like that with that shape. And so I was thinking about like a soul survival template or blueprint or something to help people feel that they can, I don't know, find the balance between the two. It's almost like survival for, or nourishment for the soul. But practical action. One of the things that I find sometimes is that, I mean, that's the thing that I really like about you actually, is that you take practical action. It's all well and good to know the truth of things at a spiritual level. And we also need to take practical action, and we also need to, know how to do that. There's I guess what I see a lot happening around is that there I don't know how to explain it really because I don't want to kind of name it, because if I name it, I don't want to exclude or judge, and obviously everything we do is judgment, isn't it? But I feel like some of the practices or teachers out there that I've come across aren't always practical, and I really like to work with people who are practical. And I feel sometimes that some subjects about how we can make sense of the world are bypassed. And so I'm trying to find a way to help people learn things about spirituality and learn things about themselves, and reprogram their thinking away from things like guilt, blame, shame, and anger, in a kind of practical way, so they feel like they can take some action, and they can find a direction. So I was thinking something like the soul survival, or something like that. But now I've explored it. It doesn't feel quite so right. But like an hour ago, all of a sudden I had this thinking, that feels really right. That feels like what it is. I asked quite a few people. I've had a really funny week actually, Rick, because I've had a few people contact me and thank me for hosting videos. All out of the blue, and saying, that I chat with some really great people, and that these are helpful, and I know that there are some people who've made connections, to different people, probably you included, and so, messages are being spread, and I love that. And so I wrote back to them. I said, can you come up with like 3 words that might describe the kind of impact these videos have? To see what words came out. And things like revive, reset, reboot, And so all of those words are also playing into it. So I'm playing around with a whole ton of words. If I could feel really clear at the end of this, that would be great. But I know this is about moving beyond trauma.
Well, it's a bit traumatic not be able to find the name instantaneously.
Yeah.
I
mean, you've
got survival.
Soul survival. I mean, you've got a real flair for names, haven't you? Like your heart mastery course is very beautiful and very practical.
Thank you. Well, because it describes succinctly what the topic is about. So, forgive me, but the soul doesn't need to survive.
No, I know that.
Never born, will never die. It's infinite.
Yeah.
What needs to survive is us human beings.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. What am I meaning by the soul as such? I mean, obviously, I know the soul doesn't survive. Yes. We're infinite beings. But it's that how the soul is expressed through earth. It's our personality. I mean, I don't want us to have a ego survival course because that's not very useful. But right. I just want to provide something that helps people feel like they're supported to step outside of their normal programming. Because there are seekers, aren't there? There are so many seekers, and lots of people are awakening and realizing that a lot of the what they've counted on as being real is possibly made up or completely made up. And then, underpinning that is the way we've all been cultured into thinking. All of our value systems have all been designed and sold to us to help us stay in this mindset.
Yes.
So anyway,
what is it that emanates from the soul? It's consciousness, isn't it? And consciousness and love are synonymous.
Yeah.
So what do most people need in life?
Love, forgiveness, kindness, loving kindness.
Bringing more love into your life. How practical is that? And
yeah, that's very practical.
It's the language of the soul, isn't it? Anyway, we can talk about this later.
Yeah. Sorry, because we were here to talk about moving beyond trauma.
Yes. Well, your book will help. This course will help.
Yeah. Right. Who knows?
Exactly. Well, if you want to move per person from one place to the other, that is helpful and it's practical, then that's exactly what we need to do with this trauma. So it's relevant. What we're talking about is relevant.
Yeah, it's funny because actually I see that how we've all been raised and educated is kind of fracturing our soul, or fracturing our sense of who we are, fracturing our inner knowing, like taking a sledgehammer to our intuition and completely dumbing it down and completely intuition, sorry. Yes. Just writing something. I'm actually very good at intuition, aren't I?
You are extremely good.
So yeah, it is it is a mind programming. It is mind programming that we've been subjected to, in my opinion, and the awakening of that, the realization of that, is quite traumatic, isn't it?
It is.
So we've got two people watching.
People need?
I don't know. Let's put this out. We've got a couple of people watching, and it's really funny because we've got our show title, and actually what we've been doing, or what I've been doing, is wittering on about the name of a course to help people come to terms with the life they're living, and the one that they know is possible. And so if you've got some ideas on what that might need to be called, let us know, or let us know, what do you need? Like, if you were to, do you need any support is there something that you're looking for right now? What's made you tune in today? I'd love to know. I'm sure you would as well, Rick, wouldn't you? So trauma then, moving beyond trauma.
Moving beyond trauma. Okay. I think it would be true to say that most of us have experienced some form of trauma, physically, mentally, or emotionally.
Definitely.
So those things tend to stick with us. So let's, and I make no apologies. I have been working on the material of Gabor Mate, and particularly from his YouTube channel. He has a book called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts.
Wow, that's a great one, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. And so what happened to me last week was as a result of the practical applications of what he was saying was around trauma. So this is, while I've known about his material for quite a while and been working with it, the application to myself that I'd be working through something of my own stuff had a remarkable impact. So I can credit Gabor Mate for this session, except the bit where we had one talking about your book. So what is trauma? Trauma is something that's happened in the past that has caused us pain. Right? And it can be, and there's two kinds, and I'm just going to read a couple of notes here. Overt trauma separates us from ourselves. We lose ourselves and gives us a very negative view of the world. We act accordingly. We're defensive, grandiose, aggressive, angry, violent, whatever on that scale. So exactly as you just mentioned a little while ago, we separate from our true authenticity. Yeah. This is called overt trauma. And developmental trauma is when the good things that should happen to you don't happen.
Yes.
For instance,
like for instance,
not being hurt
properly. Are you talking about? Sorry to interrupt. Are you talking about the rites of passage that all humans should go through at some point? Like the as you grow up, you should have some challenges to help define yourself. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm not sure that that's the connection. I think it's more like, and I find this in the coaching, people have trauma around parents. Parents weren't there for them. They weren't being held in the way that they felt they should be, or treated in the way they weren't. They weren't being heard, right? Not in my own childhood experience, but in that era, children should be seen but not heard. That was the mantra.
Yeah.
And somebody not being there, dad's away, working his bum off, trying to keep the family alive and progress. And from the child's perspective, he's never there. You're not there for me. Right? So it's how we form a perspective. So this is the developmental trauma. And what we do is that when we have this trauma, we adapt around it. What can I do? Because it's painful. What can I do to relieve myself of some of that pain? So we find a modus operandi. And it starts with an adaptation, which then the adaptation becomes the problem. We find a solution. How do I get rid of this pain? So we know very clearly any addiction is an adaptation to masking the pain, to making the pain go away. So we've got alcohol, drugs, sex, work, Britain's Got Talent, Facebook, Twitter, all of these, anything that will give us a dopamine hit, anything that will see that, oh, I got 53 likes on that post, or I've got
so
1.1. I'm not talking about myself here. I'm lucky to get 3, and they're all from my family. So I twist their arm and tell them, you better like this. So the adaptation, how do we adapt to living with this pain, this trauma, is we create something that will give us, let me read the definition of it. Addiction is any behavior that the person finds temporary relief from or pleasure in, and therefore craves or suffers negative consequences in the long term and can't give it up. So that's an addiction. Now, the word addict comes from the Greek origin of it, which means slave. So it's, unfortunately, we've ostracized addicts. We see them, dirty, unwashed, homeless. They're just drunks. They're just druggies. They're on heroin. And society has labeled them in a very derogatory way. And yet, addiction means slave. So we become slave to the iPhone, become slave to the social network, we get slave to alcohol, we get slave drinking, overeating, eating the wrong things. All of these things are addiction. So most people don't recognize that about themselves, that there is an addiction. If you are compellingly doing these things or compulsively, and it gives you some pleasure, I'm not talking about gardening, but you could make gardening addiction because you neglect the house, you neglect the family, because gardening gives you some temporary respite.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody says to you, "I've only had 2 carrots today," you'd think that's a bit weird. Like people, when people say something like, "I've only had 2 drinks," you think instantly that person's got a problem. Because they're talking about something that's addictive, and they're trying to minimize their connection with it. But like, you instantly know if people are like, you just wouldn't say that about carrots or cabbages. I've only eaten 2 cabbages today. But if they did, you'd also think, wow, there's a bit of an unhealthy attachment there. You're right. We do ostracize people because of their addictions. I had my own alcohol problem, or problems actually, that had them, got rid of them, got them back again, and got rid of them. And it's insidious because people will do. From my own experience, I know that when I was indulging in alcohol, it was really because I was trying to forget myself. I was trying to forget who I was. At some level, it was easier to kind of be careless about who I was. And I really appreciated it. And it wasn't something that I really did in company of other people. It was something I did on my own. Because if you're going to lose yourself and embarrass yourself, you might as well do it on your own. It's a very difficult time for people. I once took an addict in. I was managing a small hotel, and somebody knocked at my door. Somebody who said he was a sponsor, and he had this man who was an alcoholic, and I mean he was in a terrible state. And he said, "Look, tomorrow he's going into rehab. Can you look after him for one night? Here's enough money," and just kind of dumped this guy off with me. And then I never saw him again. And this guy was with me for 3 or 4 days before I could get him anywhere. So I had to try and get him help. And it was a really sad state of affairs for him. And I heard a little bit of his backstory and how it came about. And sorry, I sort of interrupted.
No, it's all part of the conversation.
I mean, I'd be hard. I think it's hard going to find anyone that hasn't had an addiction. And for most of us, the pain of maintaining it gets too much at some point, and we're able to pull ourselves back if we're lucky. But there are some unfortunate souls that really can't pull themselves back and do need help.
Yes. And some that succumb.
Yeah.
overdosing and things like that.
Yeah.
But we have to change our perspective on how we see them. These people are hurting.
Yeah, definitely.
These people are hurting. And so there's a false idea that if I'm hurting and I hurt somebody else, it'll make me feel better. It doesn't. Right? Revenge might give you some temporary respite, but there's nothing permanent or lasting or loving about that. So we need to be more compassionate. And there are so many people hurting on these people that are in power, that are inflicting inhumane principles and policies upon the human family. They're hurting. Right?
Yeah.
And as much as we would like to see them at the end of a gallows, perhaps, or whatever,
I smiled
they're they're really perpetuating the pain of trauma. And this trauma can be passed on culturally, right? If you look at Jewish people have been persecuted for very thousands of years, right? And now if you look at the behavior, and I'm not anti-Jewish, right? You look at what's happening in the Gaza Strip now. There is an overly aggressive idea that if you cause any pain with us, we're just going to give you hell. Right?
Yeah.
Now that applies not to Jewish people, to lots and lots of other situations, and I just use that as an example. They've had trauma. If you just look at the Holocaust as an extraordinary trauma that has never been relieved, and the addiction, in my estimation, is they're addicted to power because they have lost that power. In Auschwitz, they lost all the power, right? And now they perpetrate the same thing, and it becomes addictive. And look phony masculinity. Look at these people in power, and wanting more and more money, billions of dollars, and more and more power. This is an addiction, and most people are probably not aware of it. They may not be aware of it, but underlying that is a trauma. But it's not the trauma that is the pain. The trauma causes pain, but the real pain is the addiction. How have we dealt with it? What is the story behind the trauma? It's what follows the trauma that is perpetuated. So, trauma begins, addiction begins with pain, and it ends with even more pain. We've seen that in society. And the cleverly addicted person will justify everything. Why they are perpetuating this. And it's hard to wrestle it off them, because this is the one thing that gives me some respite from this pain. Right? I drink, right, because I can't deal with my boss or this pain. Right? I take drugs because life is so cruel to me. I can't stand this pain. Right? So we self-sabotage ourselves. Right?
Yeah.
And it's based on some narrative that's going around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about self-sabotage. There are, I know quite a few people, over the last like 15 years or so, who cut themselves and self-harm and things like that, and like eating disorders. And, all of that was completely new to me. And I was really shocked to hear that people would do that, but it's no different really from me drinking too much. It's, we all have our little ways of self-sabotage, and we're very cruel to ourselves at times.
Yes, the principle is the same.
Yeah.
The magnitude of what we take it to can vary from one person to another. We had a lovely 13-year-old boy here stay over 5 kids stayed over last weekend. One
Wow.
of them got marks all over his wrist.
Oh,
Well, at 11. And we are seeing more and more of this now with younger people.
yeah.
So, and what's behind it is the pain of trauma and the addictive behavior that they can't give up. They can't give it up, because if I give it up, I'll collapse.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to get to that place I call need of change. Where is that need of change? When you get to need of change, then you'll give up the addiction.
Yeah.
You'll work towards rehabilitating yourself and coming back up the spiral of consciousness. So bringing it back to my personal story, which I delved into last week, using this material, right, is that when I was 5, I was sexually abused by a pedophile uncle. And I believe that was the trauma, but I always focused on that being the trauma, the cause of my irrational behaviors. Right?
Yeah.
More to the point was, I never spoke about that for 30 years. I carried that around with me for 30 years. My parents, we were on holidays. My parents they knew this guy was gay, but they didn't know he was a pedophile. So how could they protect me? They couldn't wrap me in cotton wool 24 hours a day if they didn't know about this man's behavior. So the abuse was there, and I didn't talk about it to anybody for 30 years. And at the time, my little 5-year-old brain was, where's my mum and dad to protect me? They weren't there for me to make sure I was safe and protected and nurtured and loved. And that's the pain. They weren't there for me. Right? That was it. It was a false narrative. I'm alone here. I don't fit in. Nobody's interested in me. Nobody cares what happens to me. What I do, nobody can protect me, and I'm disconnected from my real self. And that's the root cause. That's the root cause of it. We disconnect from our real self, and we build this phony persona, which gives us, and we get addicted to that persona, or we get addicted to that substance or that behavior. And you can't take that away from me, right? Because there's nothing left, right? That person robbed me of my soul. No, they didn't, right? We, knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously, disconnected from who we are. And we built a story all around it, right? This narrative, which is completely false. It comes from the ego, which in itself is a false sense of self, right? And we build this painful, we think it's giving us some relief, but it's a painful lie. You're not good enough, right? And yet you're an infinite being having a human experience. Yeah. You're a soul that was never born and will never die. And now you're not good enough, that you needed somebody to protect you, right? It would have been nice if somebody could have stepped in physically, but if they didn't know what was going on, right? And I never ever blamed my parents. My dad passed away before I was 35, but I brought it up with my mum, and she was aghast. She had no idea this guy was a pedophile. And she broke down, and I said, Mum, it's not your fault. Yeah. It's not your fault. How would you have known? Right? You wouldn't have known. And I was always the adventurer. I was off adventuring down the canals in the farmhouse. So that was my pain. I had disconnected from myself, and I was feeding this narrative, this addictive personality. Right? And one of my addictions was adrenaline. So I'd go off and do these extreme things that would just heighten my adrenaline. This is, adrenaline comes when you fight or flight. Yeah. Right? So I would attract myself. I finished up in the Vietnam War. I finished off rescuing 53 guys off a sinking vessel in Australia, got awarded medals for it, went back and found something else. Right? Just addicted to adrenaline, right? Until I really understood what was going on.
Yeah.
So it served me. Everybody thought, you were so brave. You got medals in Vietnam, you got all this bullshit and stuff, right? And nobody would have seen it as an addiction. And you can look at it, you see people are addicted to extreme sports, right? It goes beyond being fun. It becomes, I've got to do this. I've got to, I can't give this up, right? I'll die. If you leave me, I will die. So we get addicted to love. Addicted to love.
Such a
and
good song.
addicted to all sorts. Addicted to all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So that was my the real pain. That was the real pain. Disconnecting from myself and building a false sense of myself, which is exactly the definition of the ego.
Wowzers. That's yeah, I mean, I sensed that you were very quiet, even though we don't really talk during the week. I felt that something wasn't quite right. My spidey senses were tingling a little bit. That's a lot to go through. Do you think your liver cleanse brought that up?
No, it didn't. This has been percolating to the surface. I think I told you that I'd been experiencing bouts of grief, short 5-10 minutes of grief that would bubble up. I knew there was something there. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew there was something there. And this has been going on for quite a while, and I've managed it, and I've recognized it, and I've always wanted to dive deeper and deeper into it. So I was doing something about it. It wasn't that I was running away and addicted to something in order to get some relief from it. I was actively working at it, but it was so well buried that I didn't have access to it. So last week it just came up. And it was this is what Gabor Mate said, something along these lines. The original trauma was the loss of parenting, a parenting contact, protection, connection, and safety in the world. He expressed those words, and I almost like I put my finger into a 220 volt electrical socket. Something went like that.
Yeah.
And there was an instant recognition, instantly. And the tears flowed out, but I read, that's it. It was a loss of parenting contact in that moment, a loss of protection. Nobody was protecting me, a loss of connection with myself and the outside world, and safe. I wasn't safe. I wasn't safe in the hands of this man. And that's all it took. That one sentence that Gabor Mate announced on one of his videos, and it shook me to the core. And that's when I started joining the dots. How amazing is that? So I'm very, very grateful, and I can highly recommend your viewers and to all of us to explore this man's principles and procedures, because people spend years and years on a psychologist's couch, or heavily addicted to psychiatric drugs, which you can never get off. Right. So we can resolve these things. Right. We can go into the prisons for the guys that have been stealing things and fighting with a heroin addiction to get money into the family. We can rehabilitate them. We don't punish them. We can rehabilitate him. What was missing in your life that caused you so much pain?
Yeah.
That one question, what was missing? My parents were never there. Or they were always fighting. There was never any happiness.
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh, the beautiful Vietnamese Buddhist monk, said the greatest gift that we can give our children is our happiness. A family that is embroiled in happiness is the best gift we can give our kids.
Definitely.
I add one more, I think, presence, our presence, being present for them. But if you're in a miserable household, and think about the misery that's occurring now through lockdowns and a lack of human rights, lack of job, lack of a future, right? Think of the unhappiness that is being spread around this world. And we're bringing kids up in that state. Many of us.
Well, I mean, what you're, what was missing in your life? The way the modern world is going, and the fact that most families need two breadwinners, and sometimes those two breadwinners are doing two jobs each. It's all very convenient that the governments have these creches and nurseries and then schools, and it's also a godsend for people who do have to work. I do see it both ways. One could suspect that the way it's set up is to deliberately pull families apart, thereby starting that trauma right off from word go. I always remember when I was had my first child. I was very fortunate that my husband had a job whereby we had a home, so I didn't have to work while our children were small. It's only in the last couple of years really that I've started working, and I work from home and the kids are around all the time. But I remember walking to a bus stop because I was going on a journey and had Digby, our firstborn, in a sling, and I was talking to this lady, and she was, I don't know, in her late 50s, and she had a pushchair. She also had she had a baby in a sling, a child in a pushchair, and then another child next to her. And I said, "Oh, you look really busy." We were chatting, and she was a childcare giver. Like she looked after kids before school and took, she was taking this young child to school, and she had a toddler in a pushchair, and she had this baby attached to her. And I said, "Is that your grandchild?" Because she looked like a grandmother. And she said, "No, this child's 6 weeks old. Its mum's got to go back to work." And I actually found out that this mum who'd had her baby was a midwife, and she couldn't not afford to work. And so it really hurt my heart to hear that somebody who works with babies and must love babies so much would have to go back to work when their baby was just like 6 weeks old. It just didn't compute. And the baby was dropped off at something like 5 o'clock in the morning and picked up at something like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I couldn't compute it. I've been very fortunate that we've been able to source different forms of education for our children. I see the children go off to school here at something like 8:30, and sometimes they're coming home from school at 5. That seems like a long time to be away from the parents for, when kids are really young. Fair enough when they get older and they want to. It's a tough one because most people don't see they have any choice, do they?
Exactly. In Finland, they don't go to school until they're 7. So they allow kids to be kids. They have 5 hours of school and they have no homework. So there are ways of improving the connection that we have with kids. And one of the plus sides of COVID is that more and more families have started online businesses and working from home and reevaluating their values and what's important to them. And realize that this is so good to be with the kids every day. We laugh, we joke, we play games. And it can also be very troubling if you're in a small apartment with 2 teenage kids and you can't go out, or you're only allowed to go 5 kilometers, or only one. There's a Russian friend of mine, she was only allowed to go down to buy food after it had been approved by the authorities.
Oh my
goodness. Couldn't just walk down there. Yeah.
My
So
word.
we see all of this, and as I grew up, we had no television at our place. We had no electricity. But a friend of ours had a television. And once a week, we would go there and watch the Cisco Kid on television and have egg sandwiches and fizzy pop. And that was that was like being in heaven.
Yeah.
So then television took over. Television is a really good addictive source.
It's very addictive.
You can just turn the television on and switch off and fall asleep, and then drag yourself off to bed. Now we have these things.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
these
they're
have become
even more
addictive.
addictive. They're even more addictive.
So instead of, there was my middle brother and a friend and his mum would be there. There would be 4 or 5 of us sitting around this black and white television, but it was a little community thing.
Yeah, at least you watch something at the same time.
Now this is can be a very singular thing that you're doing, although you can be connected to thousands of people, right? But
we're not connected to our own families, are we?
Yeah. So what we do is we insist on having no devices at the table, have meals together, do things together, and have fun together. So I drag the kids. I surgically remove the kids from their iPads on the weekend and say, "Come and pull some weeds out in the garden." Oh, no. It's challenging. It's challenging.
Yeah. It's funny. When it was, like, we moved here and we haven't had our internet changed over yet, so we're still on the internet connection that was here when we arrived, and we're about to get a much better one. And so Carl and I have needed to use the internet connection for our work, and our children have wanted to play a few games online and things like that, and we've just had to say, I'm afraid you can't. Like, everything down. Let's just have fun. And it's really funny because for about 5 minutes they looked at each other and didn't know what to do, and then all of a sudden this spontaneous play just came out, and all 3 of them were just having so much fun together. And you just see the creativity that occurs. Like when Facebook went down for 5 hours, it was such a relief. And one part of me, even though I knew it would cause loads of hassle and upset to so many people, I just thought, God, wouldn't it be great if the internet went? Because we know it's there, and we use it, we rely on it. If it wasn't there, we'd do other things. I mean, I used to use books. I used to use the library all the time. Now I just go straight to Google if I need to find something. And I still do use books, but I find which books I need from Google rather than going to the library. And there's all these experiences that we miss out on. Sorry, I feel like I've taken it away from trauma, though. but all of these things are instrumental in us disconnecting from the truth of our lives. And connection.
And our behaviors are the symptoms, not the cause. They're the symptoms.
Yeah.
So we should ask ourselves the question: if we want to resolve this, what was missing in my life, or what is missing in my life, right? And what are my behaviors that I feel I can't give up, right? I get some short-term pleasure out of it, and it's whatever is that behavior. We can see those because they're very observable, right? So if we want to get ourselves out of this and do it on our own, then let's identify the behaviors that we have, and are they life enhancing, or are they addictive? Am I a slave to this behavior? Right? And it's a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. You have to stand up and say, my name is Joe Blow and I'm an alcoholic. So if we can say, my name is Mary Frist and I'm addicted to Facebook, that's the first start. Right? And if we have addicted people in our family or our community, we see them that they're slave to it. This is their way of dealing with pain. And we could say, well, I don't want to deal with this. I'm out of here. Or we could try and coerce them penalize them for it. None of this is going to work. There, they're going to go back. It's like the hidden bottle of gin behind the fridge. There's always ways of continuing the addiction. So the only thing that we can do is use compassion. Now we know that the pain is not the trauma, but the pain of the story and the disconnection. Now we can say, I support you. You may not have found a way of resolving the addiction, right? But I support you on this journey. That's compassion, right? Yeah. That's compassion. So there's some useful tools for how do we get out of this trap.
Yeah. It is an interesting one. I know when I had my alcohol issues, I never felt very supported by the people around me. I felt they were just irritated by me, and told me, stop it, put that away, do this, do that. And we'd never gone to the state of what's going on. How are you hurting? And so
would they have known that? Would they have known that? Would you have known that at that stage?
Well, no. I mean, I had to do it for myself. I had to actually. In the end, I was very. For my addictions, I've always really loved the books by Alan Carr. Not Alan Carr, the comedian in England, who's known as the funny man, although I find him really unfunny. But there's Alan Carr, Allen Carr, Carr, and he's written about alcohol, the easy way to stop smoking. I also used that, and it worked perfectly. He doesn't really necessarily look at the compassion side, but he looks at the mindset that you go through, and he basically shows you that there's absolutely nothing to gain by having these things. Like with my addiction to alcohol and cigarettes I had, as I read the book, I just got to see that there were absolutely no advantages to it at all. We might say, I like the taste of cigarettes. I like this. And we have all these little things that we say, these little truths that aren't truths, but there's sort of these accepted truths, like having a social drink, or, the all sorts of different things that we have. And he dispels all of those rumors and those things that we'd learned. And those things that we all say is actually how we keep everyone in the addiction, or that's one of the ways, because we have this collective way of making it okay for each other. That's why addicts often stick together.
Yes. Yes.
They can help ring fence people so they can carry on their habits.
Yes.
So I found those books very helpful, but also at some level, the pain of being me in that state got too much. And I'm quite future thinking. I'm always thinking about the future, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But I could see that if I carried on going down this road, that my life was not going to go in the way that I really wanted, and the pain of missing that would be much greater.
Yeah.
So I was lucky. I was able to kind of talk myself around, with the help of the book, and also my instinct that there was something much greater going on. But no, I don't remember anyone sitting down and saying, "What's your pain?" or "What's going on?" And that I did on my own.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
and thankfully, there's so many really good writers out there, and teachers and people who've shared their own journeys. I got hooked on antidepressants as well, and in the end, I just realized I wanted to feel again. I realized I was like a zombie. I wasn't having any emotions. Sure, I was happy all the time, but it wasn't real happiness because I didn't experience sadness anymore. It was like being in this weird kind of happy coma. And in the end, I just said, this isn't right. And I know they doctors and whatnot will say, oh, you can't do that, you can't just quit. But that's what I did. And obviously, just in case anyone does listen, I'm not a doctor. You need to find your own path to healing. But for me, just going cold turkey just worked perfectly. But I know lots of people who are absolutely stuck on medications, and pain
Yes,
relief as well
yes,
is a big one for
yes.
a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's so true. We all want to be wanted. We want to be valued. We want to be loved. We want to be held. We want to be heard. All of these, where they're missing in our life, can be traumatic. So we adapt ourselves to how do I deal with that, right? So it starts with pain, and it ends with pain.
Yeah.
It never resolves, right? So we've got to resolve the pain, and that's where it takes courage and bravery. It's one of the heart virtues. It takes courage and bravery to take this trip down inside the pain, in the darkness, in the shadow. But as we look with the yin yang symbol, the dark teardrop holds a dot of white.
Yes.
So,
it does.
and we are, in a way, we have a robotic or obedience to authority, and we have apathy.
Yes.
Some people are apathetic about dealing with it. It's too hard. I can't deal it. I'll put it off. Or justify it, just completely justify it, as I did throughout my life. Right? So it's good to get rid of these things and see them for what they are. And I think we have, at some level, attract them to us as part of the journey to becoming more conscious, more compassionate, more kind. So I see them as always a good thing. So whenever something like this comes up, I feel the grief coming, to bring it on. Right? And diving into it, radically accepting.
Yeah,
There's a big one. Can we accept, right, that some people just cannot be there for us, or are not interested, or don't want to be around us, or don't like us, or don't love us? Can we accept that? If that's the reality and we're fighting that, we will always lose.
yeah.
So there's so much. One of the things after I did this, it made me look, and it brought tears to my eyes, of how much pain human family is enduring right now. How much pain, and how much longer are we going to put up with this pain and endure it until we turn around and face it and deal with it and say, enough.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore, but I'm not running away, right? I'm going to deal with this once and for all. This is what is the great awakening that's happening at the moment. I'm very, very confident that this is what's happening. So if you just took COVID as an example, look how many people are actually protesting all around the world. How many people are now giving up their jobs? 1,400 jobs were lost from one of these medical facilities because people stuck by their values.
Yes.
Right? They weren't being stirrers. They weren't being conspiracy theorists. They weren't being haters. Right? They maybe just did their homework and found out, I'm not ready for this. Maybe in the future I will. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I went back the other day and thought about it. I've had polio vaccination. In Africa, I had more than one yellow fever, cholera. In Australia, I would cut myself deeply or something like that in gardening or rose bushes. And if I needed it, I'd get stitches, but I'd get a tetanus shot every time.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm for vaccinations. Right? So I take umbrage when people say, "Oh, you're just an conspiracy anti-vaxxer." No, I'm not. And they even have today the yellow World Health Organization passport that you have to carry around with you when you go in from one country to another in Africa.
Right.
And I can just bring it out and go through immigration. I'll just show you. Have you been vaccinated? Yep, there it is. There's yellow fever. So there are a lot of people that are coming to realize there's something that's right. Right? I've taken a vaccine, and yet it's not protecting me from getting COVID, right? So I have to take another one, right? And in some countries now, that if you haven't had the fourth one, your passport is negated.
Yeah, I heard
1.5 million people recently
yeah, I
had
heard
their electronic passport negated.
yeah. If
Where
you've
does
only
this
got 2
end?
vaccines, you're considered unvaccinated. They've changed
Yes.
your
Yeah.
it's I mean
And you're not 14 days after the vaccine, you're not considered vaccinated.
it's just
So
ridiculous.
if you die within 1 to 14 days, all right, it wasn't COVID because you're not considered vaccinated.
Yeah, you're not counted. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So there's so many things that critical thinking will bring these to the surface, and more people are seeing this.
yeah. What a strange time we're living in. I'm gonna have to run in a sec and do active mum stuff. But let's just recap what we've looked at. Right at the start we were talking about your liver flush and sensitivity, and I hope I went easy on you, Rick. I didn't call you names or anything, did I? Although I just called you Jeff. Then sorry, forgive me. I know that
it's okay. I get called all sorts of names.
I tell you why, because I've got my Facebook open underneath. I can just see my Facebook tab, and I've got 2 messages flashing up, and one is your name and one is Jeff's name, because you two have messaged each other from the groups that I set up.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're talking about the liver flush, and then the idea of conspiracy and possibly that it's truth seeking. I totally agree with that. We were talking about definitions and survival versus soul. And I think I'm just going to ditch my course actually and just start again.
Don't do that. The world needs it.
And Gabor Mate, in the realm of the Hungry Ghost, the book that you've been reading, we've been talking about trauma, and I think your definition, or Gabor Mate's definition, was what was missing in your life, and did he say it was something parental, that the trauma starts from there?
Well, it often is, because we learn from our parents and they learn from theirs, and it goes back. So is it genetic or is it culturally passed on?
Yeah. And to deal with our trauma, we often get different behaviors, quite possibly addictive behaviors, to help us cope with the pain of it, to bring relief from the pain. And most of us think of addictions as alcohol, cigarettes, drugs and stuff, but then we've got money, power. One that we didn't mention is sex. That's obviously a very strong addiction for many people. Like self-sabotage.
Can I interrupt you just there?
Yeah.
Quick list: gambling, sex, work, social media, relationships, internet, shopping, eating, profit, and power.
Yes.
There's just a handful of them.
Yeah, definitely. And so we become a slave. And so we've been looking at the behaviors of addiction, the stories that exist behind it, and and how do we get through it? It's compassion. That's how you got through yours, was compassion. Any other things that you want to kind of finish on or wrap up with?
Yeah, just very simply, we have trauma. It's then there's pain. Then we adapt to the pain, which gives us an addictive behavior, which gives us more pain. So then when we've had enough, right? When we've had enough, not when somebody else says we've had enough, but when we've had enough, then we can turn around. And if we know this process, we recognize there was the trauma. What was missing in my life around that trauma?
So that's that question.
I needed to fill that gap, because now I've separated from myself. And I need to fill that gap.
What gap am I filling?
Yes. And then we work through resolving this.
Yeah.
by direct self-inquiry, by being radically honest with ourselves. Yes, I am addicted. This is my addiction. What pleasure do I do get relief out of it? I do get some pleasure out of it. Good. Now, what could I replace that with? Right. So we replace it with life-enhancing activities and behaviors. Right?
Yeah.
We resolve the situation and replace those learned behaviors into something that's life-enhancing.
Yeah. That is fantastic. That was amazing. So just so I've got it written down correctly, we start with the trauma. From that comes the pain. We adapt to the pain with different behaviors, which we kind of repeat and test. And then if we've had enough, if we get to the stage where we had enough, we can start to go down the route of self-inquiry. We notice the gap that we're feeling. We ask ourselves what's missing from our life. And if we're lucky, we might have somebody that we can share that with. And, you know, as we find things like compassion, radical acceptance, and truthfulness, because I do think as you drop an addiction, you can be truthful about it. When you've got an addiction, exactly. You have to lie to keep it going.
Exactly.
And then from that starts something life enhancing. Okay, I think I'm going to have to leave that there because I've got to go and wake up Carl now because he's online in 40 minutes.
Right. Well, go and do your wifely and motherly stuff.
Yeah.
And I'll carry on doing my fatherly stuff.
Your life-changing work. Your life-changing work.
Yes. Well, there's one more. Perhaps let's just finish on this note.
Yeah.
If the pain of trauma disconnects ourselves from ourselves, right, then we must reconnect physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually. And what is the source of that? Consciousness. We must become more conscious.
Ooh, yes.
Ooh. As we become more conscious, naturally we'll have a deeper connection to the body and respecting and honoring it. We will filter out these negative thoughts, low-level thoughts and limiting beliefs, and we will change our lower-level emotions of fear, blame, shame, and regret into enthusiasm and joy and happiness.
And clarity, yes.
And clarity and truth.
I love
and
that.
all that good stuff.
And all that truth-seeking that we love so much.
Yes.
Well, my beautiful friend, I love you lots. Love to you and the family. Have a beautiful week ahead. And to anyone that's listened in today, thank you so much. If you're joining us after we've recorded this, I also thank you for your presence. If we can be of any help, please do feel free to get in touch with either of us. You can, Rick, what's your email address?
Right there. Info at Rick Pursell.
At rickpursell.com.
It's on my website. Anyway.
Okay. And it's Louisa at feelgoodastrology.com. Anyway, bye for now. Take care.
Love you heaps. Thank you. And you too have a great week ahead.
Fantastic.